McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop, Season 3, Episode 4, Number 13. October 15th, 1921. Diary, I did what any sensible person would do when a fast-approaching troop of plague-masked monsters was coming their way. I hid under the bed. I told myself they wouldn't pick this building. There were hundreds in this district. Why would it be this one? This one was nearly at the edge, close to the tunnels that led back to that weird mask with the gaping eyes. The odds of one of the 12 Whiskelets choosing the same building I had come to hide in were very slim. Unless, of course, they were coming here expressly for me. They could probably smell me. They had probably seen me in their murky crystal balls. Or whatever. I settled myself under the bed, hidden by the bedskirt, and I tucked my toes in. I had to pray that it was all chance, or that, if they did know I was here, they wouldn't be able to find me. I have never been more afraid in my life. Honestly, I haven't been. It felt like a nightmare, with weird, shimmering eyes that I couldn't get away from. I had walked into a bad dream. This wasn't even my world anymore. It didn't play by the same rules. In my world, there are people, places to go. If a man is after you, you can hide in a closet, and he might not know you're there. Anything could be possible here. Everything was magic. I was the only familiar, sane thing in this entire world. I felt clammy. I felt like a Civil War soldier about to have her leg removed. I needed to bite a bullet, because there was no anesthesia for this. I gripped you, Diary, as hard as I could. It was just you and me in this world. You were the only thing, separate from myself, that smacked of normalcy. I gripped you so hard I got tiny crescent moon dents on your front cover. Within a few minutes, the moment I'd been dreading arrived. The lights went out. They had entered the city, completely. If the lights were out here, it meant that their footsteps were right outside my door. This really was like a bad dream. With its whimsical, uneven walls, the way that these things had to arrive in the dark. You can't have a bad dream in the light. They couldn't move from place to place without snuffing out the lights. In the darkness under the bed, I shut my eyes and listened. I tried not to breathe. I waited for the sound of the door to open below me, for footsteps to creak up the stairs. I didn't hear anything. I started to breathe a little more easily. Suddenly, the lights returned. Green. I gasped, out loud. I couldn't help it. It was a good thing those creatures weren't here, standing over the bed, or they would have heard me. It was just such a shock. The room filled with green light, like the ghost of Christmas past had suddenly appeared. Filmy, ethereal, noxious green light hummed behind the bedskirt, glowing through it. I took this to mean that one of the Whiskelets had chosen this bed and that I was shortly to die. I confess, Diary, that I got tears in my eyes. I was scared enough to cry. The emotion was so strong. At least I managed to be quiet while I was at it. But after half an hour, no footsteps sounded on the stairs. Nothing had entered this house. I began to pluck up my courage. If nothing else, I just wanted to know. Shifting slightly, as quietly as I could, I slid out from under the bed. The first thing I did was look at the bed. In case Whiskelets were so quiet, one had somehow entered and was now lying asleep in a plague mask and stocking cap on the bed. Nothing was there. My heart rate had increased just at the thought of seeing a Whiskelet, however. I was jelly all over. The candles in the window were now burning green, like the eyes of a ghost. The flames were sickly and somehow dimmer than usual light. I crept to the window and peered out, past the glare of the flames. The whole city was transformed, green. The windows now glowed like specters. I was mesmerized. I felt a not unpleasant thrill, and just for a moment, this adventure started being fun again. I strained my eyes for a sign of a Whiskelet. The city was dark, hard to see in, but I thought I saw a blur of movement in the distance. Then, a door to one of the larger buildings opened, and green light spilled out. I saw a small man with an awkward stance stumble out. That was Wrath, wearing his black and red striped coat. 2 whiskelets stood in the doorway in their large cloaks, and they let him out. They nodded to him, slow and reverent, in their odd masks. I watched Wrath. The whiskelets shut the door, and he was left alone in the street. He stared up at the building for a moment, then traipsed down the street. I leaned forward and watched him, lips pinched in excitement. I prayed he wouldn't wander off the beaten track. I watched him zigzag through the city. Thank goodness I was on the 4th floor and could see far. And then he opened a door of one of the buildings in the distance. I memorized its spot, the particular slant of its roof. When Wrath didn't immediately come out, I took it that was where Wrath had made his home. I went down the stairs in a flurry. I paused outside the door, peeped through the window glass, and then I stepped outside. The air. There was something in the air. I'd never experienced anything like it. It was chilled, but it also felt like, I don't know, like the air had been singed, like lightning had just struck. I felt like I was smelling nightmare. But there was something bewitching, even pleasant about this, because I was in a nightmare, but the nightmare didn't know that I was here. And I like snooping. It's one of the greatest joys in my life. So, snooping through the Whiskelet's world without their knowledge, it gave me a shivery feeling I enjoyed. I dashed out into the streets, head down, praying that I would be able to find Wrath's building. I angled far away from the building that housed the Whiskelets, praying, of course, that it housed all 12 of them, and that 2 or 3 weren't out for a stroll. In a few minutes, I had dodged down several crooked streets, passing latticed shop windows that glowed with a haunted green light, like a deserted town that was waiting to bite you on the neck. I found Wrath's building. It wasn't hard. As soon as I did, I stood on the front step and got a bad case of the clammy hands, supposing he had visitors. But I had to try something, and this was my best shot. I tried the door, and it was unlocked. It swung open, delicately, and I poked my head in. "Wrath," I said. This was a bigger building than the one I'd chosen. I slipped inside and shut the door behind me. The room was dark, and Wrath was nowhere in sight. I found the staircase and climbed it to the 2nd level, creaking all the way. I was quite apprehensive. "Wrath," I said again. I heard a sputtering in the corner, and something broke. "Dear God!" Wrath said. "I thought you were a Whiskelet." "I'm so sorry," I said, moving into the room. "Are there any Whiskelets around?" "No," Wrath said. "I came here to get away from them." I came and helped him pick up the broken pieces of a vase that had tumbled into heavy clay chunks. When I'd finished, I sat down on the floor. Wrath stood there, hunched over, puffing in and out like a fish. "Wrath," I said, "where is the Whiskelet's magic room?" Wrath's wooden puppet eye rattled suddenly. "Why do you want to know that?" he said, in a dangerous voice. "I want to get out of here, in case you hadn't noticed," I said. "But," Wrath said, "do you know where it is? I assume they have one." "They do have one," Wrath said, "and going there is the most dangerous and terrible thing I can think of. It's their epicenter. Why would you go there? I'm afraid to even think about it." "Well, I know where they are, don't you see? Where's their magic room?" "No," Wrath said. "Wrath," I said, "I know where the wasp is. It's safe to put my hand in the fruit bowl. Now's my shot. Tell me how to get there." Wrath ran his hands down his face, groaning. When he let go, his wooden eye bounced a little. "You go past the fountain," he said. "Turn left. It's a weird room full of bells and whistles. It's near here. It's where I meet them every morning." "How long is it until morning?" I said. "About an hour." "Damn! Just that?" I said. "Well, yes," Wrath said. "Although they might meet me here in the morning, in their current house." "Did they say how long they'd be in this district?" I said. "Just until the meeting," Wrath said. "They told me it's time to decide. They told me I need to make a move. They're getting pushy." They were moving on from the district after this meeting, which was happening in an hour. This was my only shot, to snoop in their magic room, knowing that they wouldn't be there. "How long does it take to get there?" I said. "About 20 minutes, Wrath said. 40 minutes. I could do a lot with 40 minutes. Couldn't I?" "I've got to go," I said. "Good luck," Wrath said. "I really do wish you the best. But if they find you and torture you, I'm going to swear I've never seen you before in my life." "Thanks, Wrath," I said. "I'm being transparent with you," he said, "just so you're not shocked later." Grumbling, I left Wrath without a formal goodbye and dashed down the stairs. "Left at the fountain, I muttered. I almost didn't care if any whiskelets saw me at this point. I wanted time. I kept low and avoided the more visible streets, but I ran all the way to the end of the district, where the cave wall opened into a fountain room. It was majestic. It really was. The room was tinged in silver, and the fountain sprayed upwards, going almost a mile into the air. I actually stopped in my tracks and stared up at it, then remembered that I was going on a mission. Beauty can sometimes distract me, utterly. I took the left turn, and my heart was hammering in my chest. I felt like I had too much coffee on an empty stomach. I was jittery and a little bit sick, and I felt slightly disconnected from my own body and brain. Not the best of places to be when it's time to go snooping in a strange creature's lair. I ran down the tunnel, and I felt the wind of the cave along my ears and throat. The air was sharp, tangy, salty, with a hint of the sea. I felt like I was about to rush into something, the way you feel when you're rushing up a sand dune, waiting for the first glimpse of turquoise. I reached the end of the tunnel, and I found myself suddenly in a dark room. It smelled like dust. I found that strange, since the rest of the cave is so perfect and waiting, and enchanted to always be clean and neat and ready. This was used. It smelled rather shabby and dirty. I tried to teleport again. I felt a soft thud in my stomach, but nothing happened. My throat closed up. I was scared. I fear, more than anything else, loneliness. I didn't want to die alone, and that can be a challenging thing to be afraid of when you're alone in a cave world, surrounded by creepy bird people. "All right, Maud," I said. "I know you better than anyone. You don't need someone else to do this for you. I know you are scared. I know you are having a panic attack. I know that you feel so disconnected from your body that you are going to levitate off the floor. You are not going to stay in that head fog of fear. You are going to come down. You are going to get into your limbs. You are going to move and take action. You have 40 minutes. You are going to see if there is anything here you can use. You are not a child anymore, and no one else has to do this for you. You can do it. You." I've mentioned, diary, that I can feel quite lethargic, like I'm going to hide and never come out, sometimes when I'm afraid. I feel too small. Like I am a shrimp person, standing inside my own stomach, unable to reach anything. Well, lately I haven't been feeling that way. I've been feeling a bit more alive, a bit more surrounded by allies, a bit braver and sharper and more ferocious. But now, the enormity of my problems had increased. Perhaps this new Maud had been growing a bit, but the size of my foe had swelled, and I felt shrimp-like again, small and squeaking. There's a voice in me that pulls back and shuts down like a turtle. I couldn't afford to shut down right now. Small and squeaking Maud would have to do. I looked around the room. Smoky, soot-stained lamps hung from the ceiling, their shades made out of shabby red fabric. The chains they hung on were old and rusted, and they swung slightly, like a giant had just bumped through the room a minute ago. There was a soft creak of the chain, like a mouse squeaking in the corner. I looked around the room for gigantic door frames that conveniently led back into a warm bakery filled with muffins. Alas, there were no such doorways, no portals to my world, so I looked around for something else to rifle through. There were plenty of books, but the thought of sitting down trying to learn a ghastly spell in 40 minutes did not appeal to me, I daren't say. There was a large copper basin on one table, and I stood on tiptoe and peeped into it, hoping it would be a portal I could jump through head first. I didn't know what I was looking for, or what I was going to do, until I got a brainwave. A real brainwave, a really good one. These death to all mice birds, these whiskelets. Supposing they had a murder object lying around. It wasn't outside the bounds of possibility, and if they did, I think I could get back into my world. The wrong time, of course, but being on planet Earth sounded much, much better than being stuck here. There were always things I could do. I began to dash through the room, touching things, like a girl who can't decide which flower she's going to pluck. My fingers danced from this to that, hoping with each thing that I would be suddenly whisked somewhere, with a whooshing feeling in my navel. I had covered nearly all of the room, in only about 5 minutes, when I heard a cackling sound behind me. I was outraged. I had had 40 minutes, and here I'd been, accomplishing things in under 10, when all of a sudden, something had the audacity to show up. It was a horrible sound, too. A mad, disjointed cackle. It was loud and unexpected, and it echoed on the walls of the room. It set my teeth on edge, like a vibration had hummed sharply into my bones. I whirled around to face the thing, whatever it was. My heart was in my throat. I thought for a minute that maybe I'd imagined it, because nothing was there. It was just darkness and silence behind me, and the quiet swinging of the lantern chains. I walked around the table, as fast as I could, to see what had cackled at me. I thought it was something short that was hidden behind the table that I couldn't see. Some sort of little goblin, squatting and hugging its knees. But there was nothing there. My heart began to come down out of my ears, and I wondered if I'd imagined it completely. My blood was still thrumming with fright, when it happened again. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The loud cackling reverberated off the walls, and this time I saw what it was. It was a large glass frog, squat and melted-looking, that sat on the far table. Most of the time, the glass frog looked like a grey, indistinct lump, but when it cackled, it lit up with green light, and you could see the bulbous eyes and the sneer of its face. The noise came from inside it. I was confused, because this was a lump of glass, not a monster that could hurt me, and my fear-fogged brain didn't understand why it was cackling at all. Then something in the depths of me said, "You need to hide. You need to hide now." So without really knowing why I was doing it, I ducked under a shelf, crawled and squirmed behind a large glass barrel, and lay down on my side. I shifted a barrel from the back to the front to better hide myself. Then I lay there, out of breath, wondering why I was acting like a child at a Halloween party. A mere 30 seconds later, something entered the room. I say something because I couldn't see what it was, because I was hiding behind large glass barrels with my knees tucked in. But I knew what it was. I could feel it. It was the Whisklets. And anyway, logic told me that it was the Whisklets. They were the only beings here. Oh, diary. The intensity of my fear cannot be described. I felt like I was going to sneeze. Is that a funny thing to say, that I was going to sneeze? Because it wasn't dust. It was a weird, almost psychological feeling. My whole face was tingling, centered in my nasal cavity. Something in my skull was thrumming with the presence of the Whisklets. I felt a pressure, like something in my nose was about to snap or pop. I breathed very carefully through my nose and tried not to sneeze. They brushed into the room on soft footsteps. Their long, tattered grey cloaks swished. I was rather startled to see boots. Somehow, I thought they would have nasty, clawed bird feet. I told my heart to come down out of my throat, but it was no use. I didn't even know what I feared. Death was one thing, but this was something more. This was a grisly, drawn-out death, with things that looked like phantoms. I remembered, suddenly, my fear of doctors. Plague masks meant doctors once, in a hopeless time. I was surrounded by ancient doctors who wanted to kill me slowly. "Brethren," one of the Whisklets said. At the sound of his voice, my heart spiked. I'd always known they were here, but hearing them talk was 10 times worse. "We have very nearly convinced the human to join us." "I don't see why we need another member," another one said. "You wouldn't, 12, a Whisklet said. "You don't want to be usurped." "I wouldn't be usurped," 12 said. "I'm tired of being the lowest man here." 13, if we got him, would be the lowest man. I just don't think we need anyone else. "There will be more power if we have 13 members." "We don't need 13 members. I don't like the human. He's part puppet." He has madness and pain surging through him. He is exactly what we need to be our 13th member. We don't need a 13th member made partially out of wood. He summoned us, a Whiskelet said. We were hoping he would summon us, and then he did. He called us into the cave where he committed atrocities. That is a sign. I still do not think we need him. We do not need 13. I remember, another Whiskelet said, when our number was 3. The tallest Whiskelet, one with a purple plague mask and uneven eyes, strode forward. Things were better when there were 13 of us, he said. Whiskelet 0. May she rest in peace, the Whiskelets all murmured together. Whiskelet 0 was the first Whiskelet, the original Whiskelet 1, before she was killed and we all shifted ranks. I was once Whiskelet 2. I have seen us since the beginning. Things were better when there were 13 of us, before she died. Things were better because we had a good leader then. I felt a wave of fear go through me, like a hot curling iron. But I also felt intrigued. A Whiskelet had died. Been killed. It meant they weren't invincible. I wondered what would happen if I jumped out and stabbed one with a hot poker. I didn't have a hot poker, so I stayed put. They all lapsed into a sullen silence, until suddenly one of them said, Brethren? What is it, 7? I smell a human. You smell wrath. His grubbiness is all over your hands. No, the Whiskelet said, and I felt every hair on my arms slowly stand up. I smell a human girl. We hope you've enjoyed Season 3, Episode 4, Number 13 of McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawnshop. McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawnshop is written and performed by Minerva Sweeney Wren, all rights reserved. Ladies and gentlemen, do you have ghosts in your house? Well, let me introduce you to Vicks Vaporizer, a surefire way to get rid of any ghost. Do you... Hang on. Are you hearing an advertisement right now for Vicks Vaporizer? You are not. Do you know why? Because this podcast is free and always will be. This podcast is advertisement-free and always will be. However, there is a unique opportunity awaiting you if you become a $1 patron. Minerva Sweeney Wren hopes to start a second podcast called The Dark and Decrepit Planet of Spin, where instead of merely listening each week, you will solve real puzzles and make real choices that determine the outcome of the tale. Think of it as an enormous collaborative storytelling adventure. For more information, please go to patreon.com/SweeneyWren. Please consider sharing this podcast with your friends. A post on the audio drama subreddit, an in-person recommendation, or a social media share do more to market this podcast than anything Minerva Sweeney Wren can do on her own. She relies on you. McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawnshop will continue with Season 3, Episode 5, The Origin of the China Eye.